Chapter 35. Finisterre's pool is in the castle's basement. Do castles have basements? Well, it's underground. It's humongous. It's lit by torches on every side, and it's got to be one of the raddest pools out there. It feels like you're in a dungeon or a secret underground lake. The walls are all rocky and cave-like, and the ceiling is super high, so the sounds echo wildly down there. When you cannonball from the diving board, it sounds like an actual cannonball firing. And the water in the deep end is so deep, no kid has touched the bottom. Once we sprinted down the practically endless stairs, there was a short hall that opened up into the pool area. Ahab took the lead, dashing in as he yelled, "Surrender, you cowardly pirates! From the heart of the inferno we've come to destroy you. For hate's sake I spit my last breath at you. I will sink your coffins to the bottom of the pool." Wow, I knew Ahab was intense, but this was next level. As we rounded the corner, I expected to see one of two scenarios. One, Hanzo laying waste to 15 pirates as Kid Mozart and Wiki cheered him on. Two, Hanzo, Kid Mozart, and Wiki breakdancing around a bunch of tied-up pirates, with 3, Hanzo doing a 5-minute-long head spin as Blackbeard cried. Not even close. We all skittered to a stop, so quickly I almost fell into the shallow end of the pool. Right smack in front of us, so impossibly enormous that I got chills staring up at it, was a pirate ship floating in the giant pool. And not just any enormous pirate ship. The Queen Anne's Revenge, the most infamous pirate ship of all time. We'd read all about it in the library. 100 feet long, 300 tons, 40 cannons. This was the frigate that gave sailors nightmares, that made people shudder when they heard its name, that caused terror when it was spotted at sea. And I could see why. It was gigantic, menacing, and packed to the brim with cannons. And did I mention it was massive? Pirates lined the edge of the ship, way more than 15 of them. There must have been 50 or 60 of every shape and size, but all terrifying. Where did they come from? "So glad you could make it," Blackbeard cackled. He was standing at the edge of the ship with a sword pointed at Principal Gale, who was walking the plank. Hanzo, Wiki, and Kid Mozart were tied up behind him. "You're just in time." "You're making a huge mistake," Gale called out to Blackbeard. "I am? No, I'm afraid you made the mistake. You should have let me use the bell. Making that decoy wasn't easy, and for that you will pay. My crew will get some real satisfaction sabotaging this perfect school you're so proud of. Isn't that right, boys? We'll burn it to the ground." The pirates cheered, and Gale's eyes looked like they lit on fire. "Never," she said in a deadly whisper that carried across the pool. Then she locked eyes with Miss Vlad and nodded. Miss Vlad took a few steps back from our group and looked over at Brady and me. Did any of the pirates have long-range weapons, like guns or bows and arrows? Brady and I shook our heads. I definitely hadn't seen any. "Good," she said. Then she took a running start, jumped into the air, and transformed into a giant bat, shrieking wildly as she thrashed through the air toward the pirates. I knew she was a vampire. I knew it. I couldn't wait to rub it in Wiki's face for the rest of his life, if we lived past today. "Okay, team," Cleopatra said, picking up a sword a pirate must have dropped. "While she's causing a distraction, let's get on that ship and vanquish those pirates." The teachers roared their approval and raced toward the ship. Ms. Kahlo looked at us and motioned firmly for us to stay. Fair enough. We watched the teachers race up the gangplank, harpoon, cutlass, and lance raised above them, yelling wildly as they joined the fray. Suddenly, it got super noisy. Clangs, shrieks, screams, thuds. I was worried, because the teachers were still outnumbered 10 to 1. I motioned to Brady and we raced over to the ship, heading nervously up the gangplank, afraid of the scene we'd see on board. It only took a second to realize that the pirates were winning. The teachers were putting up a good defense, with Cleopatra playing general while Ahab kicked some serious pirate butt, but it would only be a few more minutes until Blackbeard's crew captured all of the teachers. There were just way too many pirates. How could I help? I scanned the scene desperately. On the other side of the ship, Hanzo, Kid Mozart, and Wiki struggled with their ropes. Wiki motioned for Brady and me. The pirates were definitely way too focused on the teachers to notice us, so we snuck around the epic fight and headed toward them. When we got there, we started looking for the knots to untie them. "What happened? The world's greatest ninja got captured by pirates?" I asked Wiki. "No way. Hanzo practically beat their butts with one hand tied behind his back, but then Blackbeard put his blade to my neck and he had to drop his sword and surrender. The crew found Andy and dragged him over to Blackbeard, who forced me to ring the bell 1,000,000 times, summoning these maniacs. And the ship? We're doomed. This is hopeless." "Not yet," said Hanzo, who had somehow freed himself from his ropes. He pulled a dagger from his belt and then freed Wiki and Kid Mozart. "Stay here where it is safe," he said, and then did a double backflip into the middle of the brawl, immediately knocking down pirates left and right. "Well, that almost evens the odds," Wiki said, staring at Hanzo in awe. Then he looked back at us. "But it won't be enough." He was right. Ahab and Hanzo were both taking down a lot of pirates, but more just seemed to sprout up all the time. Also, why is Senor Q wearing armor? "Remember Don Quickie?" Brady sighed. "That's him. He's apparently the worst knight of all time." Senor Q was wrestling loudly with the ship's mast, convinced it was a huge snake. He screamed at it in Spanish as 3 pirates surrounded him, scratching their heads. "We need one more hero, one who isn't completely out to lunch." Then we heard the horse. It was galloping at full speed, and the sound was getting closer, the hooves clanking on the stone floor and then stomping on the gangplank. We all turned our heads just in time to see a knight in glittering, flashy, silver and gold armor raising an enormous spear above his head. "The cavalry has arrived," he yelled, and charged his horse right into the middle of the fracas. "Antar!" the teachers yelled, getting a second wind now that a real knight was on their team. The pirates all looked terrified, and the faculty used it to their advantage. Hanzo and Ahab were knocking out 3 pirates a second, and Miss Kahlo and a now human Miss Vlad were tying them up at Cleopatra's command. Antar jumped off his horse and slashed through their ranks like a hurricane. Brady cheered loudly as Wiki and I just watched, jaws dropped. If you've never seen a famous ninja or knight at work, I highly recommend it. 2 minutes later, the teachers were all lined up in a row with Principal Gale at the front. They were facing down Blackbeard, and behind him his pirate friends were all writhing on the floor, tied up. "Drop your sword." Principal Gale said it firmly and fearlessly. It sent shivers down my spine. What a principal. Blackbeard smiled. Uh-oh. "Drop my sword? Gladly." He lifted the sword up high and made a big show of dropping it. "What's that line again? The pen is mightier than the sword?" He pulled a feather out from behind one ear. "I agree completely. You should have asked me to drop my feather." Then he calmly walked over to his captain quarters, opened the door, and pulled out a tied-up teacher. Jekyll. Everyone looked confused, especially Jekyll, until Blackbeard tickled him with the feather. "You call yourself a pirate?" Ahab asked Blackbeard. "What nonsense is this?" Blackbeard held up one finger of his left hand as he tickled with his right. "Wait for it." Jekyll laughed, and in between laughs gasped, "Stop! Please! Please don't!" "Stop it!" Principal Gale yelled. She motioned to her teachers. "Get him!" All at once Jekyll's body began bulging. First his chest and his arms grew to monstrous size, then his legs, and finally his head morphed into the beast we were all hoping we'd never see again. Chapter 36. Hyde let out a monstrous howl. "Yee-haw! Wow! It feels good to be out of that puny cage again. Now who's in the mood to party? And by party, I mean get beat up," he yelled, punching his fist into his other hand. Everyone took a few steps back, not sure what to make of the raging but smiley monster. "These teachers specifically requested a party, Mr. Hyde," Blackbeard said calmly, pointing at the faculty. "Aw, shucks, really? You guys requested a Hyde party? I'm touched! Now let's party!" Hyde lifted a cannon over his head and threw it against the wall, shattering it. Then he did it again, with another 3 cannons. Woo! Do I know how to party or what? Everyone was still in shock over what was happening, and they were just standing there like idiots. Blackbeard didn't waste a second. "Get your friends involved, too," Blackbeard yelled to Hyde. "Oh, right! How could I forget?" he yelled, leaping over to where the teachers were standing, frozen in shock. "If this is a pool party, why isn't anyone in the pool? I'm sure the water's fine." Before I had time to think, Hyde started lobbing each teacher enthusiastically into the pool. It was a long way from the ship's deck to the water, and he threw them hard. It sounded like a bad belly flop each time. I was worried they might be seriously hurt. Then Miss Vlad turned into a bat, and he headbutted her and threw her in too. "I just headbutted a giant bat! How awesome is that?" In no time all of the teachers were off the ship, flailing in the pool below. Blackbeard pointed down at Andy. "Now destroy the table." He looked back at his pirate friends. "Cross your fingers, boys. If this doesn't send us back, nothing will." "Cannonball!" Hyde yelled as he took a running start, jumped 100 feet into the air, and cannonballed right onto Andy, shattering him into 100 pieces. Blackbeard cackled loudly. "We're free!" "Party's over, everyone," Hyde growled. "Now you're stuck with us forever." "No!" Brady let out an enormous scream, and I gasped loudly. Wiki just stared in shock. Andy, destroyed. All hope was lost. I heard some deep rumbling below us as the floor shook. It felt like a little earthquake, but it only lasted a few seconds. How odd. Then Blackbeard noticed us at the edge of the ship and laughed. "Perfect timing, lads. Hyde, I promised these kids a spectacular death. Could you help me keep my promise?" "It's very important to keep promises," Hyde yelled as he bounded over to us, scooped the 3 of us up, and leapt down to the pool's edge. He shoved us all to the floor, hard. Then he grabbed Kid Mozart by his fancy shirt and lifted him up over his head. "Now how should I kill you? There are honestly just too many choices." I had to do something. "Wiki," I yelled. Wiki looked over at me, his eyes too terrified to process much. "You're right next to Hyde. I need you to kick him in the butt." "What? Are you out of your mind?" He shook his head so hard I thought it'd fall off. "Wiki, for once in your life, you need to trust someone other than yourself. You need to trust me." "No way. I mastermind the plans. This is life or death." "No, this is just death, unless you kick him in the butt right now. Wiki, trust me." Wiki looked like he was fighting a battle in his brain. Okay, how does this sound? I throw a piano directly at your face." Hyde was looking for feedback, but Kid Mozart looked like he was about to die of fright. It was now or never. "Wiki, now, I yelled. Wiki took a deep breath, closed his eyes as hard as they'd shut, and kicked Hyde smack on his left butt cheek. Hyde dropped Kid Mozart and flung himself around. For the first time ever, he actually looked angry. Boy, was this a dumb idea. I waved. "I want to go first." Hyde pushed me to the ground and put one huge hand on my chest, holding me down. "Ooh, requests. Okay, then. Let's start with you. How should I kill you?" "Wait," I said as he slobbered all over me. "What?" he yelled, his eyes bulging from his face. "Okay, Hobby, you have maybe 3 seconds to think of something. If you don't, you will die, and all the bad guys will go wreak havoc on the world. 3 seconds to save yourself and save the world. No pressure." I looked around. All the adults were out of commission. It was just Hyde and little old me, and I was so terrified I was shaking. Shaking! The entire room seemed to shake when Hyde destroyed Andy. What was that rumbling below? Maybe it wasn't an earthquake. Oh, hold on. Remember the rumors, Javi? Remember what kids say lives under the school? Okay, I had an idea. If I was wrong, I'd be dead. And if I was right, I'd probably be dead too. But I might save everyone else. Well, I thought of a more fun way for you to kill me. "Oh, yeah? Hey, that's pretty sweet of you. What is it? There are a bunch of awesome medieval weapons in the basement, down there. Do you like swords and spears and stuff? Do I ever? Lead the way! I ran over to the door that students were always afraid to open and swung it open. I glanced back and saw Brady's and Wicky's confused looks. Then I ran down the dark stairwell with Hyde barreling down the stairs behind me. Do they have flails? That's the spiky ball and chain attached to a stick. I'm really more of a flail guy. They're just way more fun. We got to the bottom of the stairs, and the room ahead seemed to be lit by fire. Wow, it was really hot, too. What was that dreadful heat about? My face felt like it was about to melt off. Well, nowhere to go but forward. We dashed into the room and... Roar! I'd seen a lot of crazy things since Andy came into our lives. Giant bats, loco monsters, flying beasties, but nothing could prepare me for what smashed through the stone wall in a furious rage. It practically made my eyes explode. A hideous creature reared up on its hind legs. It looked like a crazed, deformed dragon, but bigger. It had a huge head with bulging eyes that were literally on fire and giant fangs that looked razor sharp. It had thick, trunk-like legs and thinner, spindly arms, but at the end of each arm were little hands that had insanely long claws. It was easily the most terrifying thing I've ever seen, and it probably haunted everyone who saw it for life. It also reminded me of a drawing I'd seen somewhere else. The psycho dragon spread his wings and threatened Hyde with a roar and a hiss. Then I remembered where I'd seen it. In one of the Alice in Wonderland books Dad used to read to me. This was the Jabberwock, the most dangerous, murderous nightmare of all time. Oh, and no big deal, Hyde freaked out, threw me at it, and I landed on this horrifying creature's neck, clutching on for dear life. Then Hyde screamed, ran up the stairs, and the Jabberwock chased after him, crashing right through stone walls with me riding on its neck. I'm dead, I screamed as we crashed through the first wall. I must be a ghost, I screamed as we crashed through the second. Being a ghost is highly overrated, I screamed as we crashed through the third and final wall, flying into the pool area as everyone else screamed. The Jabberwock must have wondered what a pirate ship was doing in the pool, because he flew straight to it and hovered above the deck, probably getting ready to give the Queen Anne's Revenge a taste of his fire breath. The pirates went pale, but Ahab, Miss Kahlo, and Hanzo had just crawled back onto the deck and seemed less afraid. I guess the teachers knew this humongo horror hanging out in the basement. Just as the Jabberwock breathed in, getting ready to let loose a fireball or two, I saw a familiar face step into the middle of the ship, make eye contact with the beast, and shake her head firmly. Aunt Nancy? The Jabberwock seemed to see her and flew back to hide. I glanced back and saw Ahab and Hanzo rushing toward the horde of distracted pirates. Welp, those weren't good odds. The Jabberwock landed with a thunderous thud on the basement floor, right in front of Hyde, who screamed and fell onto his butt. Hey, I'm supposed to be the biggest monster, he said, terrified and also crying. No fair, no fair, I'm the big monster. He curled up into a ball, sobbing. No fair, no fair. He kept repeating it, and slowly his body started shrinking until it was just Jekyll, who looked up to see a nightmare staring him down. I got super excited that I'd defeated Hyde, and then 0.3 seconds later I realized that we now had a gargantuan psychotic dragon beast to defeat. Replace the monster with an even bigger monster. Classic hobby move. Grrr! The Jabberwock growled as he turned his fiery eyes to look straight at me. Yikes. He wasn't super stoked to have a rider. I waved dumbly. He tilted his head, wondering what to do with me. Then he glared and started sucking in air. Oh, was this dumb dragon about to fry his own neck just to kill me? Somebody help, I screamed, but no one seemed to be conscious on the ship. Hey, you beastie, come pick on someone your own size, why don't you? I looked down and couldn't believe my eyes. Jekyll was poking the Jabberwock's scales, taunting him. The beast looked down at him, and Jekyll smiled nervously. "Not to say that I'm your own size." Then he cleared his throat and stood up straight. "But put the boy down at once, or else." The Jabberwock brought its head down until it was inches away from Jekyll. I could almost hear him saying, "Or else what?" Jekyll stepped a few paces back, trying not to get burned by the dragon's eyes. Oh man, Jekyll saved my life, awesomely and unexpectedly, but now what? Either the monster burned Jekyll to a crisp, or Hyde would come back and we'd be back to square one. Could someone else help, please? "Hold tight, Hottie," Aunt Nancy yelled, running up to the monstrosity. She put her hand on the beast's neck and patted it. The Jabberwock calmed down instantly and brought its head in front of Nancy, who started whispering into its ear. Then, poof! The Jabberwock disappeared, and I fell onto the cold floor.